Hi, everyone. Happy Wednesday. My name is Raquel, and welcome back to Workshop Wednesdays with Mentor Me Collective. Today we'll be kicking off our July theme on Cloud9. We'll be exploring all things cloud computing and its incredible potential. So for those of you new to Mentor Me Collective, we're a community dedicated to empowering individuals, especially first-gen techies, with the knowledge, skills, and tools that they need to succeed in their tech careers, while also highlighting the positive impact technology can have on our lives and communities. So thank you and welcome, and we're happy to have you. See some awesome, everyone saying hi in the chat, looks great. So today our speaker will be diving into a topic on getting started with cloud using AWS. So whether you're a budding developer, curious tech enthusiast, or someone looking to expand your professional toolkit, understanding cloud computing, especially with a leader like AWS, is absolutely essential in today's tech landscape. And so today we'll explore the fundamentals and how to take your first steps into this great ecosystem. So now let me introduce our speaker, Alex Radu. Alex is a highly experienced cloud technologist, and she's now a cloud product and marketing manager at JPMorgan Chase. So let me bring her to the stage. Hey, Alex. How's it going?
Hello, Raquel. Thank you for having me. I am super excited. This is my first Mentor Me Collective session, so I'm very excited to chat all things cloud with our audience today.
Yes, welcome. And I also work at JPMorgan, so it's very cool to be hosting this with a fellow JPMC employee. So to start, we can start with an icebreaker. Gonna see what you say about this. What initially fascinated you about cloud computing and led you to specialize in it?
So I actually started as a software engineer, and then I moved into the product side. And my first role in cloud actually was on product adoption. So basically, my job was to convince people of the value of cloud and help them start their migration journey. And it's been pretty successful for the past 5 years that I've been doing the job, including a keynote that I got to be on the first row last year at AWS reInvent, looking at our CIO delivering her JPMorgan customer keynote at reInvent. So
that's awesome.
That's
pretty
surreal. So yeah.
Yeah, you're like an OG. Like we're still working on migrating, like in my space at AWS. So I think that's really awesome. It's really important work, and I'm glad JPMorgan's making those leaps to do it. Awesome. To warm up the chat a little bit, you guys are already pretty warm. You're saying a lot of hellos in there. It's curious to see also where everyone is from. But if you also want to share in the chat, like if you have any experience with cloud computing, is this your first time learning about it? We'd love to hear in the chat what your experience is with cloud computing. And yeah, so we can move on to the presentation. So I get Alex some time. So you can go ahead and share your screen. I'll bring you up, and let's get started. And we'll do Q&A at the end. So everyone, please hold your questions till the end. You can drop them in the chat as we go, and then I'll come back to them after the presentation's over. All right, take it away.
I can see the chat. So I might, after we finish with a little bit of the intro theoretical part, before we go into the hands-on, I might pause a little bit if there's any folks that have any questions after the theory part. I do have to mention that all views are my own and do not represent the views of my employer. Just standard disclaimer stuff before we get started. We're going to start a little bit with kind of the agenda and the goals for today. And again, if you're new to cloud completely, this is going to be a good session for you to kind of get a handle on what cloud actually is. We're also going to talk a little bit on the types of cloud. We're going to provide some resources, some of them free, some of them paid. We're going to talk a little bit about certifications, how important they are. We're going to touch a bit on what kind of new roles you could be looking into if this is your first cloud role that you're trying to get or you're interested in understanding it. And then we're going to get a little bit hands-on. I'm going to show you a couple of free resources that are available that you can try out, like Party Rock and CloudQuest, if you're getting started with your learning. Those are just a couple of them from AWS, but I'm also going to touch on a couple of the Azure and Google resources that are available. So I'm focusing mostly on AWS because that's what I'm most familiar with. I'm also an AWS community builder, so this is kind of what I'm used to. But I'm also going to mention a couple of the other cloud providers just for some diversity in case your company uses another provider or you're interested in another provider. So Hello, I'm Alex. I'm here because I love cloud communities and creative tech. I'm a creative technologist. I love unicorns. Um, Professionally, I am a unicorn because I've had like many different careers and skill sets that have made me who I am today. Um, and today we're going to talk about cloud and why is cloud important right now for our careers as technologists, understanding it, understanding how to use it, what the benefits are. Well, because the market in the past 5 years since I've started has exponentially increased for cloud providers and for cloud customers. About 85% of companies now use cloud services in various kind of like measures, some of them more, some of them less. But also like 61% is the growth rate of cloud market over the last year. So like these are numbers that are very, very big. They're probably similar to what we're seeing with like AI. I think 5 years ago when I started working in cloud, there was kind of like a slower but similar curve for cloud adoption where kind of like people started adopting it. And I can see the same kind of adoption trends happening with AI nowadays. So in that sense, it's kind of similar in how it's boomed, but AI is doing it at a much faster pace. So what came before cloud? Well, servers, hardware, and a lot of wires. Before cloud, most companies and most, like enterprises had their own kind of like servers and data centers, and they used to run their own kind of like cables and hardware to run compute, to run storage, databases, etc. And then this wonderful thing called the cloud came, which meant that we could access on-demand services. We could pay on demand. So like we didn't need to pay for what we didn't use. A lot of the times for data centers for companies that own them, the utilization rate is actually not that high. So you might have a server stack somewhere and people in your company might be like, okay, I want to use that for X. The reality is they probably use like 10, 20, 30% of that actual capacity as opposed to utilizing 100%. So you're still paying to have the data center, to have the server in there, but you're not actually getting your value for money back. And also you then have all the costs for replacing that hardware, for maintaining that hardware, et cetera, et cetera. So when cloud came, basically what it promised is you have access to all of these services, different parts of the world, different data centers. You access them over the internet, and you only need to pay us for what you use. So if you're not using something and you shut it down, you don't really pay us. Now, that's a really good deal, if you ask me. It's not maybe the best deal for every kind of use case out there. Some things are highly regulated. Some things are kind of like residency based, so you need to be based in that specific country, or you need to own that data, or you need to own that data center. So we're going to talk a little bit about the different types of cloud and what that means for companies. But generally, for example, if you're a small business, usually you can get free credits to host your services. And you can access any kind of service that you need from providers like AWS, Google Cloud, Azure, etc. And that could be very sustainable for someone who has like a smaller business because you don't need to have your own bespoke data center to run the stuff, and you only pay for what you use. So if you only have 100 customers that access your website, let's say you're only paying for those people accessing that website. You're not paying for a server somewhere sitting there waiting for more people to come and visit your website. In terms of what it is, I also wanted to show you a visual of what a cloud computing architecture might look. And the bit at the top where you have the cloud, basically that's your services and products that you're leveraging maybe from one of your cloud providers that you're working with. And that could be for provisioning virtual desktops. If any of you are working on virtual desktops, you might be familiar with those. Basically, they're kind of like a remote into a desktop somewhere in a data center. That's your partition of that is your desktop at work, for example, and you install your software and everything, but you can access it basically from a browser from anywhere in the world. You might have things like applications, storage, servers, etc., but all of these are actually hosted by your cloud provider, so they manage them some more than others. And then you have like the intranet, and that connects to things like your end users by using desktops and accessing those resources in the cloud, or with other kind of like devices. Maybe you're sending stuff to be printed, maybe you're sending stuff to mobile, hosting applications for mobile, etc. In terms of the benefits, we kind of talked a little bit when we talked about what is cloud, but there are a couple that, most cloud providers kind of like promote. So the agility, basically you don't need to wait to provision all of those servers and compute and databases. You don't need to have somewhere a data center where you host those servers. You can access them whenever you need them. And you also have access to a suite of services that maybe normally you wouldn't actually be managing and hosting yourself. And that could be, for example, in the world of today, things like Bedrock. So you have access to kind of like AI models without having to like go through the pain of like getting those set up and managing those. The other thing is elasticity. So again, it can scale up and down depending on the demand that you have. Now, in terms of that, you do actually need to think about how you're building that application and architecting it to make sure that it does take the full advantage of elasticity. If you don't architect it well and you want to have 5 availability zones in 3 regions at the same time, always on, everything on, that will probably not be as elastic because you've set it up to not be very elastic. Cost savings, again, you pay for what you use. Depending on how much you use, most of the time cloud will probably be cheaper, especially if you're architecting it really well for it to take advantage of all the elasticity and kind of like light switches and stuff like that, where you turn stuff off if you're not using it. And again, you can deploy globally in minutes. So if you have, let's say, a business in a country and your data needs to be residing in that country, you can use one of the regions and availability zones in your cloud providers' data centers to provision in that specific location. So you don't actually need to go and set up anything there, but your services and data are stored in that location, so you're compliant with the regulations from those regions that you operate in. In terms of the types of cloud, well, we have 3 main ones. One is public cloud, one is private cloud, and one is hybrid cloud. So the public cloud are people like AWS, Google, Azure, the cloud providers that provide you with their services, and it's public because it is publicly available and accessible to anyone who wants to use it. The private cloud, these are clouds built by companies for their company. So they're only accessed by that specific company, and they are maintained and built by their company. Usually that means they will have a data center somewhere that hosts the servers, and then they create their own kind of like platform for the private cloud that then their teams can use to create, deploy, manage their applications. And finally, the hybrid cloud is basically a combination of those, where you have public cloud and private cloud depending on the use cases that your teams need to use it for. And usually for bigger companies, that's probably the most common way to go, especially if you're in a highly regulated environment. The other part of the hybrid cloud is that you can also have multi-cloud. That's not a different type of cloud. That just means that you're using potentially multiple public cloud providers and you have your own private cloud as well. All right. There's another type of cloud, and this is more specific to the actual services and products. And this is about how much of the service is actually managed by, let's say, AWS or Google or Azure. So on the left-hand side, you have the bits that we talked about that came before the cloud. So your on-premise kind of like services, products that you might be managing yourself. And on the right-hand side, you have kind of like the applications and the services where your cloud provider is actually managing most of that. So you really don't have that much responsibility in what you actually need to manage, upgrade, update, maintain. All right. I'm going to go on into a couple of learning resources. I'm just going to ask if anyone has any specific questions on what cloud is and the types of cloud, because I know it's a lot that I've just explained to you. I just want to make sure that you're all kind of on the same page and you get the premise of like what the cloud is. I'm just taking a sip of water. Okay. I'm going to take that as you kind of get it. All right. So if you want to understand cloud more, there is a free resource, which is called AWS Educate. And you can build your cloud skills at your own pace in your own time for free. Not everything is going to be free, but there are many, many resources there that are free. There are a lot of different benefits to this. You can access it from when you're 13. So if you have other relatives, friends, etc., like that, that might be interested in learning more about cloud and technology, they can sign up and they can start learning. It is very much centered on beginners. So it does try to bring you from the start to build your cloud knowledge. They do have some opportunities for employment. They have a job board. They have, I think, a Slack channel, loads of other kind of like resources that they try to provide to the learners. And again, they do offer digital badges that you can put on your LinkedIn profile and kind of like get an invitation to join their community and stuff. So it's actually a really nice resource if you're looking to get started. Now, Victor, love Victor. You could probably follow him on LinkedIn if you want to see more cloud kind of like content. He does do a lot more in-depth content, not that much beginner, but if you're kind of like in your journey and you want to see kind of like what people talk about in cloud, he's a great person to follow. He shared the biggest mistakes people make when they start learning AWS. And I guess like the main point is don't kind of try to go super deep and try to learn everything at once because there's a lot to learn. And you really want to start learning the foundations first. So again, Educate's really good at that. And I'm going to show you a couple of other resources that you can start using to start building up that knowledge. It's really good to have a goal or like a project that you want to build that can guide what you actually want to learn and make sure that you're kind of like applying some of that. So even though the theory is great, and this is a kind of like an introduction, high level overview for everyone, you should really try to find ways to get hands-on. And I'm going to show you a couple of ways how in the second part, we're doing a couple of demos. And then community engagement. If you're a student, there are AWS Cloud Clubs, there's GitHub's Campus Experts, there's I think Azure has their own learning kind of like student communities. There's MongoDB student communities. There's Google University Developer Clubs or something like that. Student Developer Clubs, yes. So there's like loads of different programs. Again, there's like the AWS Developers Slack that you can join if you're kind of like past that university student kind of like age. So again, try to leverage the community, try to follow people that you think, share good resources, check out dev.to, try to kind of like see where the content and the learning fits with what you want to achieve and your style of learning. Now, there's a couple of ways that you can jumpstart your cloud career. It depends on what you want to do with cloud and if you actually want to be like something like a cloud engineer or developer. But if you are serious about going this route, there are also some free certification vouchers programs sometimes offer. But make sure that when you're looking at them, you actually choose the right certification. So if you want to be a cloud engineer, you probably want to start learning and do like a developer certification for cloud, as opposed to just kind of like a base level introductory, like certification. Again, the practice is really important. So make sure that you're like building a portfolio that you can show kind of like your cloud projects to potential employers. Be part of the community's content, maybe write some posts on it, maybe work on some open source projects to get your like skills sharpened. Your network builds your net worth. The people that you surround yourself with are going to be the people that might bring opportunities to you, or you might see some opportunities from them. Again, in person, virtual communities, virtual networks, very, very important. Again, the content, maybe document your journey, create some content on that. You can then have some examples to discuss in interviews if you're doing that constantly and consistently. Be curious. Learning kind of sticks more if it's fun. If you're kind of just stressing yourself out because you're not getting stuff, or you're really trying to kind of like read super dense white papers on like cloud services, that's not really going to be a whole load of fun. It's probably more fun to pick a project and experiment and build some stuff and break some stuff and learn from that. And then show determination and drive. So all the 7 points before, if you're doing those, you can then demonstrate your determination and drive when you are actually interviewing for emerging talent type of roles for cloud. So let's say that after all of that, you wanna start practicing, but do you have something for free? We're going to talk about some free resources and some paid for resources in the next couple of minutes. I did see that Sidraj asked if customers like to use cloud with a lot of services or something that has important services only. That is a great question. They depend. So for some companies, they will go with, for example, AWS. I think they now have over 200 services because of the breadth of services they offer, especially if they're a bigger company. They usually want to be able to use most of their services for different use cases. But if someone, for example, has a startup that's very heavy on data, big data, they might want to go and use Google because their services on that are kind of like top level compared to the other cloud providers, but they have a very specific use case to choose that specific provider because they really, really just want the capabilities around that type of application. There was another question around, do you think there's a near future role for AI agents in autonomously managing cloud infrastructure? Yes, I do. It will remain to be seen how soon that will be, because I think there's a lot of experimentation happening, but not a lot of production implementations yet. Will you have access to slides? Yes, I think so. I think Raquel and Chanel are going to send them over, post the link to them afterwards. Someone asked, do you know if there's access in the UK? If you mean to some of the resources and communities, there will be. I'm part of quite a few. If you go to AWS user groups, you can check out if there are any in your nearby city or area. So you can definitely have a look at that. Someone said, what's the lesser known AWS service that beginners often overlook? Party Rock. It's actually less than a service. It's a free to use open website based on Bedrock. That's kind of like a playground. I'm going to show you how to use that to really start your kind of like learning plan and cloud kind of like learning journey. That's actually really fun to use and is really good to use. It is using Gen AI for some stuff, but you're going to see it's actually pretty cool to help you learn. Someone else asked, would you recommend at the beginning of your cloud career to keep general or specialized in a particular cloud aspect? I would say it depends on your current experience. If you could potentially start with a generic understanding of the services and everything that's available, and then start to specialize depending on what you want to do in cloud, that would probably be better, because like if you'll ever need to look at an architecture of a cloud application, or you need to integrate with new services, if you don't know what other services there are there, then how can you make a good architecture decision if you don't know if there's a better option for the problem you're trying to solve? Someone asked, how does privacy work? Is that something the company choosing cloud providers have to worry about? Yes, you do need to worry about the privacy aspect. And again, just because you have a managed service from a cloud vendor, that doesn't mean that all of these security, encryption, compliance regulations are managed by the cloud provider. That is far from the truth. It is a shared partnership, and you are actually responsible for a lot in terms of ensuring the privacy, security, and compliance of your applications and services. Zen said, AWS has a lot of services for someone who's new to data analytics. What are some key services a beginner should focus on? I think it kind of depends what kind of data analytics you do. I would probably recommend, if it's data analytics in terms of kind of like AI ML, you start looking at the SageMaker and kind of like MLOps type of services, which is probably going to be helpful to you. Already streams every Wednesday. I do not know, but I think Raquel does, and I think the answer is yes.
Yes, they are.
Yes.
Yeah, we'll have some sessions coming up in August, and yeah, we have them on our page. But yeah, we have some up, I think, every week for the rest of July. So please keep tuning in. Yeah.
Cool. I will come back to questions, but I will go through some of the resources, so we have a bit of time to go through the content. So, best free learning resources. You have Free Code Camp on YouTube, and I can see loads of you are tuning in on YouTube, so you can go over there, and they have loads of content. There is an official website for AWS training. They have loads of website too. Quick Labs, CloudQuest we're going to talk about today. Educate, tutorial dojos, AWS FAQs and documentation. This is just kind of like more on AWS, but other providers too. So like there's loads and loads of resources there. The interesting question is, how do you know which ones to start with and which ones to learn? And hopefully by the end of the session, you're going to have a good idea. Entry-level certifications. They're not really free, but sometimes there will be certain promotions where you can actually get some of the vouchers for free. They're not really enough for a job. So again, a certification doesn't guarantee that you're going to get a role, but it does help you with that initial foundational knowledge of the services and what the providers have available and how they work. So I would say this is more kind of like, if you're interested in getting something that says, you've done this content, this content, you're kind of like aware of cloud for that specific provider, these are pretty decent. And I think from my experience, like the Google ones are actually a little bit more challenging than the AWS ones and the Azure ones. So if something looks similar in title for Google, they're actually probably going to be a little bit harder than the AWS and Azure ones. Additional skills that you might want to look into. So it's not all just about the providers. You might want to have a look at things like scripting, infrastructure as code, so stuff like Terraform. A lot of companies actually use Terraform to deploy their cloud applications. You might want to look into stuff like Docker and Kubernetes, which are a big thing. Loads of people use Kubernetes to run their applications in the cloud. CI/CD, so pipelines, deployments. Serverless is becoming really, really popular. Python, JavaScript, Go, backend programming languages. Basically, it's not about cloud only, and it doesn't really work in isolation. You do need to build some of your other like engineering skills and tool awareness at the same time. Roles that you could look for. So if you're thinking about, I'm going to get really serious about this, I'm going to start studying, I'm going to start making projects, start being part of communities, et cetera, et cetera. What are some of the roles that you can start looking for or set up some notifications on, I don't know, like LinkedIn or job boards for? So you could look for cloud junior developers or engineers, DevOps engineers, cloud infrastructure engineers, SREs, so site reliability engineers or support engineers. There are loads of other roles as well, and there's some entry-level programs that places like Google and AWS kind of like run. But basically start having a look at the job descriptions as well and check out what skills technologies, tools they're looking for. So then you can start tailoring your learning and your practice a little bit more based on what it is that the roles you're trying to get also want you to have. Can we use these certifications to create our own apps? Lydia asks. You can use the creation of your own app as a practice for studying for the certifications, but the certification is an actual exam that you need to have in an either assessment center or a virtual proctored exam at home. So it's more like sitting a university or high school exam than actually demoing anything to anyone. Karen asks, do you recommend focusing on only one cloud or having knowledge in multiple clouds? I think to start with, it's good to pick one so you don't distribute your attention between all of them. There are some cheat sheets and stuff where you can have a look at like the comparable services between the three main providers. You can also have a look to kind of see like, okay, what's different and how can I move from developing on one cloud to another? How can I create portable applications that would maybe work on multiple clouds? But to come back to the question, I think you should pick one, whether that's because your current employer or potential employer that you're trying to go and work for has expressed their interest and maybe like investment in one specific cloud, and then kind of like move and look at the other ones. But my recommendation is start with one and then grow from there. What is my favorite part of working with the cloud? Ida asks me. I want to say it's the creativity of people and like the super cool stuff that people build in the cloud, and things that were impossible years ago to do or took a very long time now take infinitely less time. So I think it's more about the end result and the experience for the end user than actually the technology part. Yes, it's fun to geek out at stuff, but I think the actual achievement at the end of what you do by using cloud is way cooler. And I've seen some really, really cool stuff that the British History of Science Museum is doing with AWS at some of their summits, as well as some very cool sustainability projects when I was at reInvent. I think those spaces are doing such interesting stuff, like in terms of using Internet of Things devices to like measure different things like density of animals and insects in kind of like city spaces, to measure things like climate changes. It's really, really interesting to me. But like those are kind of like the things that I'm maybe like a bit excited about. Is probably the combination of hardware and software more than just creating applications. I'm trying to see. Do you need a tech degree to work in cloud, or can certification projects be enough? So actually, I originally did not have a technology degree. I did have some experience in high school with programming, because where I come from, you have to take mandatory programming classes. But I actually went and did business management and publishing media as my undergrad degree. And after that, I did the Tech Connect conversion program into the software engineering role from JP Morgan. So I didn't start out with a computer science degree or a tech degree. I did complete a different degree. And then years later, after I worked as an engineer for a while, I was like, it's probably time to go and get the technical, like theoretical knowledge of computer science. And I went and I did a master's at Bath Uni to solidify kind of like the theoretical aspects of it. So no, you don't need to have necessarily a technology degree. It does help, especially if you're at the beginning of your career. But I think people are more interested in hands-on experience, work ethic, technology awareness, collaboration, than just making sure that you have a degree. You also can go the route of apprenticeships as opposed to just doing a degree, where you actually are employed and you spend 1 day a week doing your degree and 4 days working. So you're gaining experience, you're getting paid, and you're getting a degree all at the same time. All right, let's go a little bit. I'm going to try to see if we can take 1 or 2 more questions, and then we're going to try to go to start building. There's just a really interesting question. So Mr. Singh is asking, Kamal is asking, for undergrad students looking for internships in cloud, what's the minimal learning and hands-on personal experience expected? So I would say you should have at least a couple of like GitHub or open source projects that you're working on. Potentially have like a couple of courses that you've done. Ideally, you're involved with your cloud or engineering kind of like community in your university. So you need to demonstrate things like initiative, leadership, interest in technology, hands-on interest in technology. So I would say that anything that demonstrates really like hard skills, but also soft skills is really good. And it increases your chances. So like anything that can demonstrate your passion, your interest, and your practice in cloud and tech in general, it's really good to have. You don't need to necessarily have had an internship before, but it would be really good if you can demonstrate some of the traits that they're looking for, because obviously, no one expects an intern to know the stuff or have done the stuff at like an enterprise level, but it's always nice to have topics of conversation when you're doing interviews or assessment centers to be like, okay, so tell me about a project you've built. I see that you have something on GitHub. I've checked it out. What can you tell me that you've learned from it? And it doesn't have to be something super complex. Again, it might be playing around with some IoT stuff, Raspberry Pis, I don't know, building a bird watcher photo taker. I've built that before with a Raspberry Pi and a camera. I don't know, like something cool that like can make you stand out compared to other applicants. Is there a way to connect with me? Yes, there is. I don't know if I put my LinkedIn in the slides, but if you search for Maria Alexandra RADU, or maybe Raquel can also drop it in the chat at one point. You can add me on LinkedIn and we can chat. All right. So we're going to go, we have 20 minutes left together. So this is going to be the fun part, right? So I went into Party Rock and I made a little app to help us get started with cloud learning. And I'm going to have to see if this is going to work because I do have to switch to another tab. We'll see how the screen share behaves. But basically, if you want to get started with Party Rock, this is actually quite cool and maybe might be a cool project to add. I don't know if it's enough for like cloud because like this is technically like you're not building anything from scratch, but it could demonstrate some sort of creativity and passion for technology, even if you're not from a computer science background, but maybe you're looking for an internship in kind of like a tech-related role. So you can get set up at partyrock.aws. You can create an account. You'll have free credits to generate apps and kind of like ask them questions and talk to them. You can generate an app from a prompt. So you can give it like an example of what you want it to do. My example was something like an application that can help me get started with cloud learning and kind of like guide me through, like the decision in terms of what I should learn. I have created an app and I don't know, again, if maybe Raquel, I don't know if you could grab the link to post from the slides I shared, but basically I made a Cloud Learn Lab app that we're going to look at for a couple of minutes. And you can either create your own or you can get the link from mine and you can remix it and change it up so you're not starting from scratch. So let's see how we're gonna do this. Can I click this? Is it gonna work? Well, maybe not. Right. So this is my very simple, I guess. Cloud Learn Lab app that I made. Didn't take me very long, probably a couple of minutes. I tweaked a couple of stuff. But basically, I wanted a cloud learning assistant, and I created one. So this lets me create a personalized cloud learning journey. I do have a question for all of you. So I want you to give me a cloud experience example and learning goals, and we're going to put it in live to have a look. I've already pre-populated it with some stuff, so we can have a look at some examples of what it generates. But I'd love it if any one of you would like to put in some kind of like cloud experience definition for yourself and your learning goals, so we can actually generate one in real time. So once you do those two things, it will generate you a learning path. You can also ask it for like how long you want the learning path to be. For me, it gave me an 8-week one, and I'm good with that. It's about 2 months, about summer vacation type of length, with some time for, recharging and relaxation. And it does give me a couple of good suggestions. So it starts with like foundations and setup. It tells me I should learn some basic HTML, CSS, JavaScript. If you've never worked in tech and you've never really learned anything like that, this could actually be really, really good. And basically, I think, I just need to share the link with Raquel so she can actually publish it in the chat to all of you. So starting with HTML, really good. Learning how to set up your development environment, your IDs, stuff like that. GitHub, really good. Then it's going to have us learn a bit of backend. It's going to have us learn a bit of databases. MongoDB, really cool database. They also have a student program and an academic program, so if you're interested in that. They're then going to have us learn a bit about front end, React, components, really cool. Authentication, security, super important. Lots of interns and lots of kind of like emerging talent don't really talk about this stuff, but if you do talk about that stuff in your internship interviews, generally people are going to be impressed, because this is not what people see. It's more about the security and state of your application. And then we get into the cloud platform introductions. And it tells us to start with a couple of basic services, EC2, S3, AAM, so identity and access management. Really good suggestions. So basically, this could be like our first kind of project. Then tells us about how to prepare for deployment and how to prepare for monitoring. Gives us a couple of tips to code daily, even if it's for 30 minutes, join communities, use free resources, and create a portfolio on GitHub. So like loads of stuff that's actually pretty cool. It does assume that we're going to spend about 10-15 hours a week. That might be a little bit much, so we might need to tweak that and be like, actually, could you do more like 5 hours maybe? And then it also gives us some suggestions for hands-on projects. So like you could make a personal blog, you could make a weather dashboard, task management. So like these kind of things you could look at and be like, oh, actually, do you know what? I kind of always wanted to have like a personal blog platform or a personal website. I might just start with that as my first project. And then you can also talk to it. So you also have a chat bot. I asked it, what should I start with first? I was just being difficult. So then it came back and it gave me some answers. And then it told me okay, start with the basics, choose a cloud platform. Back to our question, do I choose one or more? Maybe start with one. Pick a sample first project. Do you want a static website? Static website is a good starter project. We're going to talk about it in a couple of minutes. And then it asked me do you want me to provide more details? Do you want me to do more stuff? So we could ask it other stuff, can you explain how IAM works for AWS? And I used to say please to the AIs. I've been told that if you say please, it actually uses more tokens and it uses more computational power. So it's actually less sustainable and less. Oh, wait, it needs to confirm I'm a human. Buckets. Great. So apparently if you're being nice and polite to your AI, don't, because it uses more resources and power. Sad. So then it starts explaining to us its identity and access management. It's like a security system that controls who can access what's in your AWS account. And then it gives us some examples for like what we can think about it, how it works, basic best practices. And then it gives us some code to like show us like one of the policies that you can apply to like a storage S3 bucket. Pretty cool. Like that's pretty nice. So you can have conversations with it and ask it to explain core concepts of cloud and core services to you. Right. Let me see if anyone put here anything that we could. You say I'm going to use your example. And then I want to say my learning goal is get an internship with a tech company, preferably in cloud engineering. So we're going to see, once we generate the responses, how it's going to change. So we can already see that it's taken out the kind of like foundational website building knowledge and it's replaced it because it's like, ooh, I have a role in this. I'm interested in cyber or I'm new to cyber. And now it's generating to us a couple more custom. It's also probably taking in the internship cloud engineering part. So it's like, okay, we're going to start with foundations and cloud basics. We're going to go into Linux and command line, networking, super important, security, super important. We're going to look at cloud services, learn what those are. We're going to talk about infrastructure code, Terraform, we talked about it earlier, monitoring, compliance, integration projects, all the cool stuff. So the link I share with you, you can go and use it as it is, or you can click this, which is Remix, make an account, and change the app to do whatever you want it to do. You can have it generate pictures of unicorns. I have done that before. I have a couple more apps in here. So you can see like, I've done some weird stuff with this. And my username is unicorn. So, you know, my love for unicorns continues. We're gonna start going into our second demo, which is, let me try to start this, which is going to be CloudQuest. So I'm not going to actually make you all do this with me. I do have a couple of videos recorded with the interface for CloudQuest, so you can have a look and see what that is. I do recommend you sign up for an AWS Builder ID. It's probably the easiest way to authenticate on all of the community learning platforms that AWS has now. And I'm sorry, Raquel, I will need to send you the link again. Oh, sorry. Audience views blurred. Apologies. I forgot to click the button. Happens. Thanks, Janelle. So CloudQuest Practitioner, this is actually the preparation quest for the AWS Cloud Practitioner certification. So if you do all of the quests and learn all of the concepts, ideally by the end of it, you'll be able to sit the practitioner exam and pass it for the first AWS certification. The repo, I'm assuming it is for Party Rock, and I think it's a little bit higher up. Raquel, if you don't mind posting the Party Rock link again, that would be great. So in the demo, we're going to build a static website. I'm actually going to take you through the lab as it goes in CloudQuest. Just a note, the only free CloudQuest modules are the ones that are for the practitioner. So anything above that, you would have to pay to access. So how do you get there once you get your account? You basically go into the lessons and you're going to see like a couple of other things in there, like networking solutions architect. So those are paid for. But if you go into the cloud practitioner, then you go into, So you go into the cloud practitioner kind of like list. You go into cloud computing essentials. After you go into cloud computing essentials, it's going to tell you where your assignment is. It's a little bit like a video game, kind of like how you move through stuff, which is actually a little bit fun. But then after that, when you choose it, you will then go to the actual lab. And a lab is made out of 4 steps. So you first learn some concepts. You have some videos where you can learn some new concepts that they're introducing. You then plan for how you're going to actually solve the challenge. And you then actually go through like a practice set of steps. And then you do it yourself, and you need to provide an answer to finish and pass that challenge. To get to the first challenge, which is to build a static website, you need to select your assignment and then Cloud Computing Essentials and then go there. So we're gonna have a look. So this is how the actual challenge looks like. So the first step was learn. It will give you kind of like some overviews. You'll see kind of like how it explains each of your different concepts in the architecture diagram. It tells you about, like how this works from like the customer perspective to the technology perspective of what runs behind the customer interface. You can go and kind of like look at the different websites. For example, they explain to you what is AWS well-architected framework. This is how you build well-architected cloud AWS applications. And it shows you kind of like all the different components that go into the well-architected framework. So, for example, it helps architects design infrastructure built around 6 pillars like operational excellence, security, reliability, performance efficiency, cost optimization, and sustainability. And you can go into all of the other videos that are on the right-hand side about like infrastructure, S3, an overview of S3. How do you actually use it? What feature does it have? And S3 is the AWS storage service, one of the most used services. Then you go into plan. So basically it's going to tell you what you need to do and how you need to do it. So you're going to look at kind of like the architecture again, and then you go into the practice. And this is basically where they give you some files, they give you some steps, and you actually go and do everything. You open up the AWS console. They provide you with kind of like the access to the console to be able to do these things. They also provide you with all the steps and all the explanations for how to do these things and why you need to do them. And once you've gone through all of the steps, at the end, when you go to do it yourself, it's basically going to ask you, okay, if you've done this, you need to have this link or you need to have this code, and you put it in and you validate it. And that's the moment that it's actually going to mark it as complete, that you've completed that module. For me, it was saying that I already validated it because I already finished it. So like I couldn't go back and kind of like invalidate it, basically. Right. If you want to learn more, AWS do have a Twitch channel series, and they do actually walk through the Cloud Practitioner AWS Cloud Quest. So if you're stuck or if you want someone to kind of like explain the concepts a bit more, you can go to their Twitch channel and search for their kind of like series, and that's gonna kind of like cover more in depth how you can go through the learning. But if you feel comfortable and you just want to go and kind of like go and start building, you can just go sign up, get an account, and start working on it. Like I said, the first modules for the practitioner are free. I think they're about 13, and they're going to cover a lot of like the base AWS services, the architecture, the infrastructure, regions, availability zones, all sorts of stuff that you need to know. And again, if you finish that, most of the time you're going to be pretty prepared to take the certification exam if you have a voucher for that. All right. Party lot link. So Tech Unveiled. Raquel posted the link again. Hopefully you can see it. Hopefully. And I'm going to have a look and see if there are some other questions that we didn't answer that I can go back to. We also have 4 more minutes. So if you have any other questions, Raquel, I don't know if you want to jump back in, if you want to do kind of like a live Q&A, or if you want to do written Q&A, we can take some of the questions that are still in there.
Yeah, thanks. Well, first of all, thank you for that amazing presentation. That was so amazing and very informative. You showed some great resources. Thanks for sharing all those resources. Sure, start people off definitely on the right foot for their cloud computing learning journey. So it's awesome.
Cool.
Yeah, we can just go through the chat, whatever ones we haven't gotten to yet, if there are no new ones. But yeah, guys, feel free to drop any new ones in the chat.
Someone asked about cybersecurity certifications. I know of the CISSP, and there's another one with a 2 in it, but it escapes my mind. CompTIA, maybe?
I've heard of that one, yeah.
Yes, CompTIA is another one, and there's another one with a 2 in it, and I cannot remember what the one with a 2 in it is, but there are pretty comprehensive cybersecurity kind of like certifications. There are also cloud security certifications. So if you want to do specifically cloud security, AWS has a like specialty security certification. They are very hardcore. So like I would expect you to be kind of like a 5 to 6 year professional in cloud, well versed in security, well versed in cloud, hands-on, like they are not easy certifications. I'm currently working on my solutions architect professional, and I'm dreading it.
Good luck. That was
associate, and that was okay. But like the professional, I'm like dreading it. But I'm like, I want to do it. I want to try it, and I want to see like if I fail, I'll fail and I'll try again. But like I'm kind of like I really, really want to go for it. So yeah.
You got it. I believe in you.
Nicholas asked, biggest misconceptions people have about working in the cloud industry, especially when they're just getting started. I think it's that you need to know everything. And the reality is no one knows everything. And that's why we have specialists. And that's why you have people with different job roles, because we rely on each other to know stuff and discuss stuff and get help and collaborate. I also think there's a big misconception about cloud roles being only engineering. There are a lot of roles outside of engineering. Like my role was in product. Yes, I do have to be technical. I do need to understand the engineering, the architecture, but I'm not hands-on coding every single day. I do it for fun, and I do it to understand things, but I don't do it because my role requires me to. I do think there are other roles in like product, program, security, compliance, risk, all sorts of other roles in cloud that aren't necessarily hands-on engineering that people forget. Architects rarely
those are huge, yeah,
or code, but they have so much cloud knowledge because they need to be able to see the system and to understand how does the system work best to solve the problems that we have. So I think like, yeah, it's a bit of a misconception that you need to be an engineer. And sometimes people who do come from alternative kind of like pathways, that come from other degrees, that come from other fields, and they retrain to be a technologist, can actually bring a lot of value and a lot of really, really good perspectives to the roles because they're not a former engineer. So yeah, I think that's a really, really interesting thing that I've noticed over the years. Are there ways to receive vouchers if you aren't a student or at a company? So there are, for example, I want to say Google ran a couple of months ago, like a digital bootcamp for their cloud digital leader, I want to say it's called. And they were offering free vouchers to take the exam if you took the course.
Oh, wow. That's awesome.
4 hours each day. And after that, you would get like an email and they give you a voucher. AWS do similar stuff for like solutions architect, some of the practitioner things. So you can get vouchers. It's just that you need to, again, keep an eye out on what people are posting, what the companies are posting, because usually they're going to post on LinkedIn about the opportunities. And I know that Chanel's great and Mentor Me Collective's great at like finding the opportunities and reposting them for people to be like, oh, this is happening. I can do this. I can, There's another thing that I was going to say. There is a grant available for AWS reInvent. It closes on 15th of July. This is the biggest cloud conference hosted by AWS. Around 60,000 people that attend every year. If you are over 21, you can travel to the United States, or you can get a visa in time to travel for December. And you are in the first 5 years of your cloud career, you are eligible to apply. There are about 2 weeks left. But my suggestion is, if you never apply, you never know if you're going to get in. So if you have a look, it's called All Builders Welcome. And have a look at it, have a look at the requirements, have a look at if you think you meet the requirements, even 80%, 60%, still good shot. You will need to do a bit of thinking on like how to tell your story and demonstrate your passion for cloud. But I would really recommend that you have a look at it. It is fantastic for people in the first 5 years of their cloud cloud career. Someone said, are there ways? Okay, Udai said, practice is the word suggested for beginners. Any place you can suggest where we can do it. Yes, CloudQuest, first place, free, takes a couple of minutes to sign up. They guide you through everything. They explain everything, but don't just kind of like click through it. Like, that's not the point. The point is for you to actually go through each of the lessons, understand the concepts, watch the videos, read the steps, read the docs, do the actual hands-on. That's like probably the easiest place where you can get started, and has everything from the videos, the docs, the steps, the labs, the practice. Everything's in one place, which usually isn't the case.
All right, we're a little over time, so want to take one more question?
Do we have one? Oh no, I think Mr. Singh just asked if what's the name of the grant, so you put it in the chat. Yeah, definitely go check out the link, go and apply, go for it.
Okay, cool. Well, if that's all, thank you so much, Alex. It was a super informative session. And I hope everyone is able to get all the links from the chat. And just a reminder, you can always rewatch this session on LinkedIn or YouTube, and we'll have future ones every Wednesday up until we don't. So please hop in and join. And then, if you miss one, you can always watch it back on our channels. So clap. Thanks, Alex. Thank you, everyone. Bye. See you next week, hopefully.